In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and breath of life. Amen. Please be seated. Oh, hello, choir. This is exciting. Wow. Don't hurt your neck from over there. Please feel free to watch the sermon on whatever social media thing we are using right now. But if you're TikToking, I'm going to know it. I can see you. Well, from this incredible story of miraculous healing, I want to take you somewhere truly exciting. General Convention. The General Convention of the Episcopal Church concluded this week with a new presiding bishop and I think a renewed spirit. This year, I got to serve for the first time as an alternate deputy. So I got to go and I got to be, admittedly, a somewhat distant part of the action. Just so you know, they are very strict about these things. An alternate can be in the gallery but cannot actually be on the floor of convention. There are folks who will look at your badge to see if you are allowed to go into the place where all the decision makers are. Now, fortunately for us, there were many, many people there, but the Ohio delegation was in the back row, which means by being on the front row of the gallery, we were right next to our brethren and our kindred who could then, two very important things, could come up to us and graciously fill us in between votes on what they were thinking and what was going on. But most importantly, because of our physical proximity to them throughout the day, they could come over and share their snacks with us. And let me tell you, their snack game was strong. Now, I got there on Sunday, first legislative day, but I arrived late because I had some family business elsewhere, so I didn't get into Louisville until about 11 a.m., and I thought that I would go on down and check in, go up to the credential table, and be given my alternate badge, and then go sit down and watch the action begin. I actually thought I was landing at precisely the right time, but it turns out I couldn't get in the door because the credential committee was also in session, and you can only get credentialed very narrow windows between 7 a.m. and 7:30 in the morning and 1 and 1:30, which meant that by getting there at 11, I was out of luck. And so I went up to the one person who's at the desk who couldn't do anything, and I said, "What can I do?" And I said, "Can I go to the gallery?" She said, "No, you cannot do that." I said, "Can I go to the exhibit hall?" "No, I cannot do that." "May I sit here and pray?" "No, you cannot do that." "Wait, no, you can do that. You can do that." And so for my first hour, I sat there at General Convention watching a door that would not open for me. Now, it's okay. I was not upset. There were reasons for this. It was my own fault that I was there after credentialing had happened. But I do have to admit, I do get the slightest tinge of feelings whenever I'm not let inside. Whenever I feel like I'm on the outside of a door that is being enforced at my expense. Many of us, we've all experienced this in some way, sometimes in very major ways. And so even when I'm in moments like this where it all makes sense, there was no injustice here, there was nothing wrong that happened, I still kind of felt that twinge of tenderness as I thought about those times in my life where I was not allowed in places where it seemed to me I really wanted to be. Now, the story ends very happily. I got into the gallery after lunch, and then because we have a very gracious deputation from Ohio, they make it a real priority to make sure that even the alternates get a little bit of time on the floor and get to hit the vote button every once in a while. So I got to vote on the president of the House of Deputies. I got to vote on welcoming the new missionary diocese of Navajo land. I got to vote on approving the 3-year triennial budget. Woohoo! So I got all the experiences, and then I got to learn, I got to experience in the convention, and because I am an alternate, I got to go home early. So not a bad way to play it. So they're just thinking for a moment about being outside a room where all of the action happens. And there's nothing wrong here, no terrible thing done. But Matt, let's go from there to this question of who exactly gets access. But let's actually talk about what happens in the gospel, because it's very much about who can reach out. That sounded like a phone commercial. Because I was going to say reach out and touch. Who can be in physical contact with Jesus? Who can feel the press of his hand against you? It's a question not just of privilege or of status, so much as a question of the heart. Who gets access to Jesus' healing touch? And I wanted to begin this thinking about who gets to be in Jesus' presence, but the touch is an important part. Right here at a number of places in the passage, there seems to be that question of can Jesus come and touch me, touch my daughter, so that they can be healed. So the gospel is in part, or at least starts, as being actually about human touch, which cannot be scaled up, which cannot be spiritualized, which cannot be abstracted. Who gets to receive the gift of tactile connection to the risen Lord, whether by being born in first century Palestine or by being in Jesus's deputation, a very privileged place to be, or even by being someone who's just lucky enough to be near Jesus when he is in town and has enough time to come and see them and even lay hands on them. That is, historically speaking, a very narrow window of people. And I'm going to skip to the end of the gospel and the homily and to say there is enough Jesus to go around, and yet we find all sorts of ways to worry about this. And when we worry, whether consciously, unconsciously, we begin to devise systems of who gets to be there, who can walk beside him, who stays at the far end of the crowd to wait a turn that I think we all really know is not ever going to happen. We begin with Jairus' daughter, a 12-year-old girl nearing death. Now, I will tell you, I have a very difficult time getting through this gospel. Because I have children, 11 and 14, this is not an abstract thing for me. Any of us know that the thought of losing someone that is so close to us is devastating. So this just does not feel like an abstract parable. So imagine what's going on with Jairus. His whole world is collapsing all around him. I asked, do you think he reached out to Jesus in deep faith or plain old desperation? I think it doesn't matter. And I don't think it mattered to Jesus. The point was that Jairus' world was collapsing, and so he asked. That right there is what it means to gain access, what it means to reach out and connect with Jesus. You simply need to ask. But the crowds were heavy, and there were many in that crowd who needed him too, whose situations were dire and urgent, but I'm going to suggest, and I think it kind of comes through, that some things are more urgent than others. Because imagine for a moment that you are Jairus, and Jesus has heard you and is beginning to walk with you through the crowds to your home, but suddenly the crowds start to get thick and people start to fall in around Jesus. Let me ask you, do you think you would be polite? I'm pretty sure I would not be. I'm pretty sure I would be using every elbow and shoulder that I had to create a space. I am pretty sure that I would be running up and down every alleyway around that crowd to see if there is a faster way to pull Jesus out of the crowd and move him out. I would, and I am not kidding, I would throw him on my back and I would run at full speed because every second matters. And when I see Jesus speaking to a woman who clearly is in need and wants healing, I might very well say, no, Jesus, she can wait. She has waited for 12 years. I have compassion, but right now, my daughter needs you right now. Who has access to Jesus' healing touch? Is it a zero-sum game? Because in this moment, in time and space, there really isn't that enough Jesus to go around. There's a lot of need, there's a lot of hurt, and there's one little girl who only has a few breaths left. But let's do what Jesus did, which was to stop this narrative, even amidst our urgency, to stop and listen to a different one entirely, which is he pauses with that woman who has been suffering for 12 years. And even though she was there with Jesus and could see him and almost touch him, almost was the best that she could do. The crowds were too heavy. And so she asks. Even though there's almost no way Jesus could hear her, she asks and she reaches out and she says, an act of, was it faith? Was it desperation? Who knows? Who cares? She reaches out and she says, if I just can touch his garment, his clothing, I will be made well. And then in this curious moment, because it doesn't happen a lot or it's not talked about, Jesus says, whoa, 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 whoa. I just felt something go from me to you. I feel a download just happen. And he turns and he knows that she has been there. And he says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Be healed. Go in peace. Who has access to Jesus' healing touch? Who gets on the floor? Who gets to be made well? Is it looks? Is it proximity to power? Is it time logged in the pew? Yes. No. No. I wish. No. Is it the ability to prove that your suffering is more profound or more urgent than another? Is there enough of Jesus to go around? On Pride Sunday, we have a chance to reflect just a bit on that question. And as we grieve the injustice of normalizing a narrowing of access to those whose genders or sexualities were regarded as conventional or safe or correct, as we grieve that, we also see that there is a deeper reality to knowing who we are and a deeper pain to not being honored and not being let into the space of holiness and transformation. Civil rights are one thing, but convincing folk that Jesus doesn't see them or love them or forcing them to the back of the crowd, the Lord is too busy for you. Breaks our heart and cries out against the very reality of how God made us, how we are to see and know and love ourselves, each and every one of us, as beloved and well-made creations of the living God. That grief is real, but it is not the whole story. For pride is a celebration as well. As we disrupt those narrow assumptions of human life that serve our false ego selves, but do so little to open us to the beautiful complexity of expression and relationship that is the fullness of who God created each and every one of us to be. Pride is not just about celebrating, it is about growing ever further into the expansive love of God. It is that growth, and that growth is for each and every one of us. I love being the parent of a non-binary child, learning through their eyes the beauty of queerness, though that also means grieving through their experience the heresy, the false teaching that some can come near Jesus while others must keep their distance. The gospel teaches us in a simple way that there is enough Jesus to go around. But the gospel also convicts us in our idea that even whether it's the urgency of the moment or whether it's the fear that we are disconnected in time and space, how do we get our child, how do we get our own broken hearts to the place where Jesus can see and hear and touch us, which suddenly we as human beings take that fear and that anxiety and we construct a whole reality around that, where for some reason it now becomes okay to decide who can come near Jesus and who cannot. The gospel teaches that that is a fool's errand, and teaches us that neither time nor space nor crowds nor arrogant use of power can keep any one of us from the healing touch of Jesus. What gives the woman who has been suffering for years access? She asks. She reaches out. She asks. She reaches in faith, in desperation, in hope. And she doesn't quite touch his body. The body matters. Yes, touching Jesus matters, just as touching and tasting the Eucharist matter, but ultimately it touches a larger reality that Jesus' presence, Jesus' incarnation is more than one body in one place and time only. A body that in that moment could be kept from the crowds by disciples who meant the best. It's not that she touches him, which she doesn't actually do. It's that she tries. It's that she reaches out and she discovers that there is power resonant in the places and the people and the things that Jesus has already touched. It's that he is the source of grace, not the storage unit. For you engineer types out there, Jesus is a generator, not a battery. And that this love cannot be hoarded, rationed, denied, or otherwise contained. Spirit recognizes spirit. And our awakeness is known in our spiritual garments. That means all the ways that we live and move throughout this world, whether we are not, we are thinking godly, Jesus-based thoughts at that particular moment. It's how your garments flow behind you, because that is often how people are going to reach out and connect with the living God. Our rational minds and our irrational minds as well, they know, though, how to build firewalls. The Spirit knows how to work around that. Let's not forget, though, about Jairus, who is still there, who amid this conversation has been waiting patiently, and far too patiently, I might add, because in the time that Jesus has made this journey, his daughter dies. Do not trouble the master any longer, they say to him, I think quite coldly, for your daughter is gone. It's over. It's done. Who has access to Jesus' healing touch? Who indeed? This child was separated from Jesus by just a few minutes, but that was a few too minutes too many. Not too many people, but 100 people is really hard to get through when they're all trying to grab Jesus' time. And when the difference is life and death of you or your child, it really doesn't matter if it's 2 minutes or 2,000 years. And yet Jesus is singularly untroubled by these things. Just as he seems untroubled by our question of who gets to touch him and who does not, because the thought does not seem to have entered his mind at all. He does not align himself with the sense of time and space that defines the story we read today. For him, there's no hurry, because there's no one left out. There is no one who is left out. Everyone in faith is a part of this. It is enough to ask. It is enough to reach out in faith or desperation if that's where you are today, or hope if you have that gift and you'd like to share it. To touch those garments and receive the outpouring of power and grace that is God's gift to us. If we but touch his clothes, we will be made well. We do not need the right badge or the right words, and we certainly do not need to fit into someone else's vision of convention or propriety in order to approach the Holy One. We are cleansed of our egos and our binary assumptions as we lay claim to this faith, as we grow, but also as we walk this holy journey together. And we also come nearer to Christ when we see the creativity and joy of godly life amplifying within us, taking on more colors, more expressions, more glitter, and even more grace. Especially more grace. This faith is what gives us the moxie to reach out, to touch Jesus' garment and imagine and trust that we will be made well. This faith is what heals us and sends us out once again in peace. Amen.